Well, guys, let's get into it. So today we have Joe Irwin, the owner of freaking Fast Forward Race Engines. You guys may know that name from building Brett LaSala's engine. That is just an incredible deal. And then he has a long history of racing. What, X275, Ultra Street, no time stuff. The class racing is like, takes a hyper intelligent level of focus and skill and trial and error. So it's like, the most difficult thing, even though from the outside it probably looks like, oh, they're just going 550s, or 450s, whatever.
Sure, piece of cake.
Yeah, like it looks so simple, but then you're like, well, once you look at the rules on Ultra Street, you're like, oh, that's not simple at all.
Yeah.
And I've been started to follow Ultra Street a little bit in the last year just because of that, because it seems so complicated. And you were there on radial racing from the start.
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close. I had a partner in the business early on that did obviously a lot of the radial racing stuff, Donald. Mm-hmm. And that saturated us in those heads-up classes, So we saw a lot of engines. We built a lot of engines. We had a lot of engines come back, and because those things run like, say, 70 runs, So you're constantly in them. So you refine them a lot.
You become real good friends with the people running them.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them you turn family members, you become family with them. But that's part of the deal is obviously surrounding yourself with good group of guys that know how to win and, know how to run good and treat the engines right.
I feel like in the last 4 years, you're very responsible for making there was 4 years ago, I remember people were like, oh, if it doesn't make 1,000 horsepower, it's not really much. Now, if it's not making 1,800 horsepower to 2,000,
sure,
it's almost like, whatever. Because these Coyotes are making that, and there's a ton of big blocks making that, of course. Couple 2Js, one or two.
Yeah, a couple.
Maybe a couple Roadmaster blocks, I guess, I hear now.
Yeah,
but,
a couple.
Man, it's crazy, the horsepower boom. It's become so easy.
Quickly, too. Not too long ago, if you had a 1,000 horsepower car, you had something. Nowadays, if you have 1,000, it's not a whole lot. That's the majority core of our businesses are these street cars that make 1,500 horsepower. We build probably 85 or 90% of the engines we build are 1,500 horsepower, wheel horsepower engines, on all the platforms, from the V10s to the V8 stuff, even the VR38 engines, they're still around that number, Yeah. Obviously, we build some that make more than that, But yeah, I think what has allowed that is the accessibility to all of these parts now. You could buy a turbo kit, you could have a mail order tune, from some guy over the internet, and be fairly successful at that range,
It's pretty crazy how that's changed. And also, I guess, the OEM parts becoming so good, too.
Sure.
That kind of helps a lot, the over-engineered OEM engines. But that's kind of a thing of the past also, is these over-engineered engines from factory, because now they're so concerned about, fuel economy and stuff that they don't...
Yeah.
The Coyote was overbuilt. The V10 from the Viper, completely overbuilt.
Sure, yeah. Obviously the Audi V8, R8 and the V10 deal, they're good engines. The thing about all of those engines is usually the castings are pretty good. Usually the castings, the hard parts, the crankshafts in a lot of instances, we use a stock crank in the Coyote stuff, and we've gone pretty far with that. But the pistons are built, to be lightweight, to take weight out of the reciprocating, to be very efficient for not oiling the chambers, all the things that the OE stuff wants. So if you remove just a few of those key components, you could really have a good piece, That's why guys are so successful just rod and piston engines, Yeah,
even the Coyote stuff, Brett's car was stock crank until... this week.
It still is. Yeah, he ran this week at Mod Nationals with the stock crank engine in it.
It's a $300 crank from Ford.
Yeah.
Or it was.
Yeah, they're $525 or something.
That doesn't even make any sense. I mean, people that build cranks are probably hating that.
For sure. They've gone up since we started that project, almost doubled in price, We buy a bunch of them. But they're good cranks. I mean, it's a forged crank, so it moves, it flexes compared to a billet crank, but they don't break. I've never broke one. You just got to give it the room to move, and it'll hang in there, So
Yeah, you work that into the machining numbers is the crank flex.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the bearing clearances through the center of the engine will be bigger than, the 1 and 5 main, because of the crankshaft flexing so much, which is pretty common in the big engine stuff, A lot of the Hemis will run, a little bit more clearance. The big block Chevys that don't have center counterweights, a small block that doesn't have a center counterweight on the crankshaft, will usually run more clearance on the center main, just because of movement,
Yeah, what do you think that car's making at the crank? Like,
Who, Brett's?
Because that's a factory Ford motor.
He might kill me, but I think it's probably just over 3,000, 3,100, at the crankshaft, maybe a little bit more than that.
I think most people can kind of guess what that's at, but it is interesting to hear those numbers from the person that puts the motor together.
Sure. Yeah, that last one had 70 something runs on it,
At almost 3,000. It's like 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Like
Cubic
horsepower
inch
to
sure, yeah.
And cubic inch, cubic inch to like 10 horsepower. That's crazy because it's only 302, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, and you don't really bore those out or anything.
No, we actually keep the standard bore. Even our Predator blocks, which we use on his, we bore it back down to a standard bore. We don't build anything with a bigger bore other than the Shelby Code red engines. And we do that just so they can keep the badging the same. It's only a 1,200 horsepower deal. So it's not like you're not trying to keep the cylinder walls any straighter. They stay straight. It's fine. So.
And then obviously stock stroke.
Yeah, stock stroke. We don't ever put any stroke in the Coyote stuff. The cylinder wall length is short enough, so you add stroke to it and the piston starts to pull out the bottom even further and it just gets a little pissed off, so.
And what most people probably wouldn't know is like you guys kind of developed that all like together. I mean, a lot of that stuff wasn't knowledge that you could just get, like, LS stuff, the knowledge is everywhere. But that you kind of had to go and learn it yourself a lot of the way.
A little bit. That's what we do. Like right now we do 5 different engine platforms, and out of those 5, that's all that we do is try to develop those better. Obviously we've built everything, but the problem with that is sourcing parts and how good can you really do a job, So by sticking to the same platforms, it's allowed us to see the engines come back. It's allowed the guys in the shop to refine their process, right? Know what's right, what's wrong when a part comes in, So that's really been the biggest thing is making sure that we, pay attention to what we're doing, when you see these things. So like the Coyotes, when Brett and those guys started running them early on, we had some piston failure, but we also had some that would run good. And it was like, why was this one living and this one not? And then you saw that with other shops. A lot of other shops had piston problems early on. So I think some of it was obviously what we learned with the cylinder wall finish and being able to hold the oil on the cylinder wall for this particular application. And then also the shapes of the pistons, and what it really needed to stay as stable as it could. So once we figured that out and we ran them and then we changed them again and figured them out, and they got better, and obviously having the right guys to give you the data that, says, hey, you are going in the right direction or you're not. That's the biggest thing,
And getting an engine before it puts all the rods out the side of the block is probably nice.
100%. I mean, that happened to us at FL2K, I got a text. I said, hey, come down here. I want you to look at something. And I got down there, and obviously all the guys, showed me the log and the, material and the filter. And I said, well, this thing's not going to last, 4 more runs. We had to make 4 more runs, to be able to win the thing. So that's when we decided to change that one out,
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret that he pulled the motor out at FL2K.
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of what we do. I mean, we're not scared to say what we do. I mean, we're running this thing really hard. Failure is part of the game. If you're not accepting failure, then you're not moving forward,
Yeah, look at any high-level class. They keep spare everything. Spare full long blocks, short blocks with them, blowers, the whole 9.
Yeah, I mean, every part of the car that would, even remotely think about breaking, you need to have a spare for.
Even people in his same class, which, him keeping a spare motor with him is pretty rare, but people in that same class do keep spare everything with them. I think people in his class put 2 motors in their cars.
Sure.
At that event, and they were fully prepared to.
Yeah, sure. I think part of what we not struggle with, but we're trying to improve on is like our spares, and that we have our improvements. Obviously we learn something every race or every 5 or so out laps. You learn something. So I feel like we're evolving it so fast even now that like the spare wasn't really any better, it was the same thing, so we're trying to be able to improve on it. I think after Mod Nationals, we're going to test a little bit more is what he was saying, and then it's going to be time to, add all these improvements that we've acknowledged over the last few months, so.
Yeah, that's also part of it too. I mean, you've been part of programs in like Ultra Street and X275 that test so heavily that they know every little improvement, where most people don't test that much to know, to get those kind of tune-ups.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to hear some of your history of that kind of racing too, because that stuff's so foreign to me.
A lot of stories there.
That I don't even I can't even comprehend like those high level when like RVW was really blown up.
I mean, there's a lot of stories there. Really, the sum of all of them is hard work. We've blown up a lot of stuff. We've had plenty of nights where me and Troy Perez Jr., were putting rings in an engine, Saturday night to go into eliminations on Sunday just so we could have the best piece. I had a Camaro that we raced in X275. We first raced it in Ultra Street as a nitrous car, had a chromoly cage in it, and when they got rid of Real Street, it was called, not Ultra Street at first, Real Street. And when they got rid of the Real Street class and went to Ultra Street, we couldn't make the weight break to be a nitrous car competitively. And I won't ever race anything that I'm not going to be competitive in, So
yeah. So when was this though? What?
This is maybe 12 years ago or so.
What Camaro was it then?
13, it was the same thing that you have.
Fourth gen.
So it's a heavy car,
4th gen nitrous car.
4th gen nitrous car, I forget what we were, 3,100 pounds or 3,050. That class, Real Street, was a fairly heavy class,
What kind of times were they at that time?
5.0s, 5 teens. I mean, we went 5 teens at the time when we were winning races with the nitrous car, The problem was, they converted it to X275 and then Real Street. And Real Street, you could take some weight out. We could get weight out of it. So then we converted it to a F1R Pro Charger, and we got on board with Pro Charger at the time and Supercharger Store, and started racing the blower class.
That seems like the nitrous guy progression.
Sure, because
it's always to like Pro Charger next. Sure. It seems like
sure, and I'm a nitrous guy. I love nitrous more than anything, but the Pro Charger thing, the engine works the easiest to go to a Pro Charger setup, right? You could keep the pistons in it, right? You should have had a big pin in it anyways. The camshafts will usually work, so it was the easiest transition money-wise, financially, to convert the car over, going from a carburetor to fuel injection and everything else. So
carbureted nitrous.
Yeah.
I guess it was 12 years ago.
Yeah, and I loved it, and I still love it to this day. But anyways, we had that car and we got really, really fast with it, but we got to a point to where we had all the old engine parts and we were just breaking them. And we went to South Georgia, Donald's race, and we didn't qualify real good. And we wound up running maybe the number 3 or 4 qualifier. And the fastest we gone at that point was maybe 5:01 with the Pro Charger deal. It was the first race, second race that we'd done it, and changed converters. We wound up going 481, I think, the first round, but we split the head literally in two complete pieces.
What engine was it in that deal?
Small block Chevy.
Okay.
So small block Chevy, it was a junk set of castings, but I wound up welding the whole head back together,
In the pits?
From 2 pieces, yeah, and we kept going rounds, So welded the whole head back together. There was a machine shop down the road. You'd surface it, and bolt her back on, and that engine was fast, but it would be so finicky that it'd take the head gasket out between the 2 center cylinders. And there'd be races where, in order to win that next round, we had to have those few extra numbers. We'd pull the head off between rounds and put a head gasket on it.
Oh, wow.
And it'd pick up 2 or 3 mile an hour, you know. And
what was slowing you down in that class at the time? Like, what rule set was it? Was it like nitrous, or was it procharger size and nitrous jetting, stuff like that? Or was it just
yeah, it
what
was all
you could really do with tuning?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was power added limited. So the nitrous stuff was jet limited, you know. The pro chargers were limited. You couldn't do anything with them, you know. At that time, you could turn them pretty hard. You could overspin them pretty hard, but they were limited on the size. Obviously, cylinder heads was a big thing for us. You know, we were limited to a 23-degree valve angle, which is the standard valve angle head. And at the time, there was good heads, but the two exhaust ports are right next to each other on that small box Chevy deal. It's hot, you know, all the time between there.
Mm-hmm.
So once we learned that we were having problems there, obviously we started working on getting more water through that area, cooling that area off, and we got them better, you know, but that was the struggle. We worked really hard putting head gaskets on every few rounds at one point, you know, just so we could win these races to, you know, be able to make a whole weekend or two out of a set of head gaskets. And then even rings at that point became a thing, you know, so.
It's crazy. Those, like, in that kind of class racing, that's what people don't realize is those little changes that you have to make, where us in like these open streetcar rules, you can just make any change you really want. Yeah. You guys are so working in these rules, or you're talking like valve degree angles and stuff like that, where
oh yeah, we would do all kinds of crazy stuff. We would angle mill the heads, we would move the valve guides over in the heads, obviously any kind of port configuration you could imagine. You know, the first thing we would do on them was start welding on them before we did anything to them. So yeah, those classes, they bring a lot of development to the sport, you know. I think all of the manufacturers should really pay attention to those guys that are doing that stuff, mm-hmm. and take that advice that they're seeing. You know, don't blow those guys off and stuff, you know, because those are the guys that are in the real world. They're seeing it, you know, especially if they're good guys and know what they're doing, you know.
And they make a lot of changes, so they try a lot of different things.
100%.
They'll try 5 different converters in one test session.
Without a doubt. I mean, obviously I'm on the engine side of it, but, you know, pistons, you know, the guys from Diamond early on, you know, Mike there would always send us pistons, you know, so we always had pistons, and we always had a different piston to try, you know, so whether it got better or not, you know, we would be able to tell them that. And then the same thing with the rings, you know, Total Seal sent us all the rings that we ever wanted, and we were the first ones to ever run like the M2 top ring, you know, which is still pretty new, but, mm-hmm. you know, we were the first ones ever to run that thing. I was the first one to do a burnout on a 275 Mickey Thompson tire. You know, we were testing with Donald, and Troy Fredrickson was driving the car, but, you know, we were testing tires. They had no numbers on the sidewalls. It was the funniest looking thing, you know, because it looked like a little balloon, you know.
And that was when Mickey was just getting into the radial tire racing, or because it was BFG at first.
Right, and then it went to 315s, and that was the thing, you know, it was 315s, and then it went to the 275 tires, started getting popular, mm-hmm. because really it was 28, 10, 5 slicks, you know, and there wasn't a really good small tire, you know, so then they came out with a 275 Mickey Thompson, and there was
So who were you guys using before that? Were you using still Mickey Thompson, but the 315s and the W tires?
Yep, exactly. And then they went to the 275s, and we ran some Goodyears for a while, you know, tested those, and that was a big old deal, you know, was, you know, tested Mickey's and then Goodyears for a little bit and stuff. But, you know, we're just trying to find the better piece, you know. Yeah. So, like, we have a lot of loyalty to it, but, you know, if something's faster, you gotta see about it, you know.
Now, I mean, I can't imagine seeing somebody pull up for the streetcar class not on a Mickey Thompson tire.
No, I mean, we had Hoosier even back then, you know. So, like, yeah, there was a big 3 in there for a while.
Now it's like,
yeah, oh yeah, if you're not running anything, you know, Mickey Thompson.
Yeah, but they also have like a couple different good options. The Pro Bracket radial is pretty serious now. I don't run those, but everybody I've seen runs those, can get down basically any surface, any track, radial prep-ish.
They've come a long way. I mean, the tires have come tenfold, you know. Obviously, everything has, but the tires have been one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first to touch the surface. It's pretty much the most important thing. And then suspension, too, has changed a lot. Like we were talking about it the other night, where who was the first person, or when did we really see, like, cars separating like crazy going down track when they're like dragging the front bumper at 1,000 feet.
Sure.
Like these quarter-mile cars, like
Yeah.
still 1,000 feet out, dragging the front bumper down.
I think when you started to see, I think the real transition to that into the radial racing was some of the guys coming in from circle track racing, right? You know, the dirt track cars, obviously they're trying to get as much forward momentum and bite as they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're on dirt. So they got to drive that tire into the ground as hard as they can, you know? So like if you watch a dirt modified, it's got the nose shoved into the ground and the ass is 3.5 feet in the air, you know, and it's got more suspension trouble you've ever seen. So, you know, obviously it resembles something like that. And then you have someone like Mark and those guys coming over, you know, from Menser, you know, obviously. And that was their background, was doing some stock car stuff and everything else. So like, you know, you get guys that, you know, come into the sport from different motorsports that have knowledge. They understand how suspension works and geometry and, you know, spring rates. You know, people don't even know about spring rates and stuff, you know. So like once they start gathering that and then they come into another avenue, yeah, they could, you know, start implementing that.
And once there's good money to win, you'll bring in those people.
100%. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
That will spend the money to figure it out, which is, it's cool and it's not. There's a lot of debate I've heard about that is like lower the payouts so that the big money stays out. But it's cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pay for this stuff, you know? So like you got to pay it out, you know? It seems like whenever there's a good payout, there's good turnouts, you know? I mean, that's just what it is. Yeah, it brings out money, but the reality is winners are winners. I've always thought that, you know? So they're going to win no matter what it is. They're going to win if it's paying $500 or $50,000. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? The same guys are going to show up and win, you know?
I've said that about rule sets too. If you make more rules, the guys that are the harder working guys will still win with those rule sets. You're only going to hurt the guys that don't work as hard and don't perfect their combo. So it kind of still evens out. Like it's always going to boil to the top.
Yeah, and I always think that, you know, hard work, you know, if you work hard, you know, I mean, good things happen, you know? So, like, whenever you work hard at something, doesn't matter what it is, you know, like, good things always come from it, you know? You go work hard out there in the yard, you know, the grass looks beautiful when you're all done, you know? The same thing with, you know, racing. If you know that you need to change the converter because the other converter's a little quicker and it's going to be hot on Sunday and that other converter works better in the heat, and maybe you should change the converter, you know, instead of going up there and maybe knocking the tires off or something, you know? So, like, hard work always pays off no matter what, you know?
You got to do the work. The other flip side of that, too, is I've seen a lot of people test their car to where it's worn out.
Oh, yeah.
And then they'll pull up for round one, and they just did all this cool qualifying and all this, like, they got that thing dialed in, and then that thing's wore out by then. Trans is about to slip, like, something stupid like that happens. And that's where I always fall in. I found if I test my car too much, it always ends up breaking on race day. Yeah. And I try to avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to make sure that, you know, just like what we talked about with Brett for the FL2K thing, like, there's not 4 laps in it. You know, like, you got to know how many laps you have left, you know, so you got to know the service cycle that engine or that rear end gear, you know, like if it's a Radio versus the World, you know, one of those pro mod things, you know, with a lockup in it, you might need to change the rear gear, you know, every 10 runs or something like that. The crankshaft in a 959 needs to come out every 30 runs, you know, or 35 runs. You know, if you run it too long, that's the picture that you see on the internet with, you know, the rods and the crankshaft in multiple pieces. So you got to know the service cycle, you know, like service life of these parts as well, you know, when you're at, say, that level.
That's where it gets tough. Like, a lot of people think you build a car and then you're good. You go race it.
Yeah.
Like, the lifespan of these things are all crazy. Like, you don't just, like, buy your car and did today. You go 400 runs on it, put fuel in it, and change the oil.
Yeah.
Like, the serviceability becomes everything. Yeah. And especially on these heavy cars at 3,200 pounds, everything is a serious wear item at that point.
Yeah, that's new to me, the heavyweight. Some of these cars that we're building these engines for, they're 35, 36, 3,700
Shout
pounds.
out Jim Braun.
Yeah. Way to go, Jim.
Yeah.
200, like.
At 3,500 pounds.
Oh, bro, yeah.
It just doesn't even make sense.
It's really heavy.
On an 8.8.
It's really heavy, bro. Stopping that thing and everything else,
Yeah.
So, and he does really good, but that's a true street car. I mean, that's the definition of a true street car. He sends me texts all the time of him driving down the road, to work.
Even the Vipers, you build all the Calvo Viper engines. Those things aren't light, and they make so much downforce that they're probably so heavy when they're going that fast that you may not even realize they're adding 1,000 pounds of downforce to the car.
More than that, yeah.
At 100 miles an hour, that car's now 1,000 pounds heavier.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like you're fighting it.
Yeah. It's the street cars now, they pack them with everything and all the safety gear. I mean, it's a lot of weight,
Ideally, all the safety gear. That's one thing that most struggle with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these cars that we build these engines for, they put them in there and they're street cars and they have no safety, or in the opposite of that, they're full race cars that they drive on the street, which is even as dangerous, You get in a little fender bender and you're hitting your head on a roll bar, it's bad, So, it's the same vice versa,
Well, even like the no time guys I see, they try to limit their safety to look like they're slower.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're trying to grudge race.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't want to put a funny car cage in it because then everybody will know I'm fast.
Yeah. God forbid saving my life or anything,
Yeah, I'm like, well, you got to get that grudge race, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't understand all the grudge race stuff all the time. My buddy Troy handles that, but that's the opposite of it. They're obviously as light as they could possibly go, and you know what I mean.
James Tolan is 240, man. That car is the epitome of as light as possible.
I'll tell you a funny story about that 240 car because it's crazy that it's still around. So
his dad says the same thing.
Yeah,
Once it gone.
I know. So this is a little one here. Me and James have known each other for a very, very, very long time, and I used to build the engine in the Nova for him and stuff, and. We had a real good friend, Shannon Wren, pass away that we raced with all the time at Sunshine over there. And we had a little memorial for him there one night. And Troy Sr. was racing and Junior and all of us were racing. And I think we wound up winning that deal, to be honest with you. But we wanted to go out and celebrate, the win, And we were pretty young at the time. So James was real young. He was 18 years old maybe or something. So we were going to go to Hard Rock, so we left Sunshine down there.
That's a good trip.
Yeah, we left Sunshine in that 240. And prior to that week, his dad was telling me about how he was street racing all these guys, and how he kept breaking the transmission in that thing. I guess the trannies aren't real strong in them.
Yeah, because it was SR Nissan powered.
Yeah, a
little
little four-cylinder deal, and we stopped at the gas station. We got out of the car, and the damn car was still running, I don't know. He had this turbo, timer on it that the car would still run for a little while before it shut off. And I'd barely fit in the seat, this little car here. So anyways, his dad's telling me how he shouldn't be street racing. He keeps breaking the transmission. I agree, I never really liked that street racing stuff a whole lot. So anyways, we're coming across the bridge to head to the Hard Rock. I'm riding with them. And these guys pull up and want to race us, because the thing looked like a little race car. And I just couldn't have that. So before you knew it, I was hanging out the window, pumping them up, trying to race these guys. And we did. We raced them and we beat them and stuff.
The competitive side comes out immediately.
Instantly, And I was like, no, once we beat those guys, I was like, now don't ever do that again. That's not what we should be doing, So then we wound up going to the Hard Rock. And we had a good time. We partied a little bit. And we celebrated like we should have. And before you knew it, we went outside. We went to leave and the sun was above our heads. It was sunny out and it was the next day. So it was a long weekend, but we had a good time. So
yeah, that's crazy. That 240 is still kicking. His dad's told me some stories about that too. He was like, I helped him build that trans one time and I told him that's it.
That was it.
You gotta watch. You better watch good.
Yeah. I mean, I bet it was 5 or 6 transmissions. I mean, it was a ton of them, and the car was sketchy. It's still the exact same car.
I was gonna say it's sketchy now.
Exact same car.
It's still sketchy. Every time I watch it, I'm like, kind of just.
I know. I wish he'd get something else, but that's,
he's got this nice Nova.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of history to that thing. I mean, that thing's been around racing in the area for 100 years.
Yeah.
So, you don't really want to tear that thing up, if you don't have to.
Yeah, when I first saw it, it had your small block Chevy in it.
The Irwin, yeah.
It was your deal in there.
Yeah.
That was a cool car when we first saw it 6 years ago before it was turbo and stuff like that. I was like, wow, this thing's freaking cool because it was different.
Yeah, it was neat. It was a fun car. It was a real original radial car,
Yeah, leaf spring and all.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, the leaf spring stuff's cool. I liked when Lyle was really pushing the leaf spring stuff and trying to like set records. And
Go fast.
It's just cool. There's just something cool about a leaf spring. I don't know why.
It's old school with those sliders and stuff. Ronnie Rhodes went really fast with those things as well,
Up until really recently, yeah.
Yeah. We raced it with the Nova. We raced the early leaf spring class. Obviously, it was nowhere near as what it was, but we ran the Nova in it. And I think we'd go 470s or something with it at the time I think we had a 565 nitrous, motor in it and stuff like that. But yeah, it ran good.
Do you avoid those classes a little bit now? I know you're kind of don't actively race like you did, but is it just because that stuff is exhausting after a while, and once you deal with it for 10 years, you're like, all right, I need to I need to chill out on this a little bit.
I think a lot of it was having my son, and I wanted to spend time with him, early on. He's almost 5 now, so you see me out there a little bit more now, bringing him some.
Because now he likes it.
Now he likes it. Yeah, he can deal with it. Yeah, for sure. I'm not chasing him.
Gambling with quarters up there.
Yeah, you've seen him. Yeah, you've seen him. Don't tell his mom about that.
It was quarters. He only won too.
It was just quarters and Dennis. It's fine. Like running that hard, it's tough on you. I always joked about Troy ran us like a top fuel team. You know what I mean? And he did. But
Troy Jr. right?
Yeah, Troy Jr. So and he did, but that's why we were successful. Because we worked hard again. So when you work that hard, obviously you sacrifice a lot. I always put racing before everything, no matter what. And I think that gets tiring, after a while. And then I think you also realize that there's maybe sometimes more to life than just that, especially if you were successful doing that, So
that's the other thing too, is like once you've accomplished your goals, it's kind of like, well, I guess I could just set new goals, but like I already feel accomplished. It's hard to really, it's hard to work like you haven't accomplished it.
When I leave one of those events and stuff, I'm so proud of all of our customers and the success that they have, but I still have that desire. I still thrive for the adrenaline dump, which I still, when I go out there every now and then, I get, when you see a guy run fast or run good or something like that. But it's not like owning your own stuff or racing your own stuff. The adrenaline, that's, I think, what I chased a lot was the rush of the adrenaline dump,
Yeah.
Beating that next guy, the competition and the lead up to it and the build up and then doing it, So I think that was the biggest thing for me. And then when I stopped racing the cars and stuff, I did some offshore stuff for a little while right before having Maverick. And that was awesome. I loved it. I throttled the boats.
Yeah, I have written actually here, Budweiser boat.
Oh, that's a whole different, that's my family, like my dad and stuff like that. And my godfather, they ran the hydroplanes early on,
So are those ones where you're in a cockpit, like where they like look like a V-shaped, almost like a Batmobile style boat, one of those deals, or what's a?
Well, so like I raced offshore boats, so that would be a cockpit boat or an open boat, and it's a V-bottom or a catamaran, usually an outboard or a big block inboard, and you'd race usually a 2.5 mile course, 2 3/4 mile course.
Wow. That's probably hard on a big block for any engine.
It's wide open for essentially an hour, about 45 minutes. The limiters are a little less, it's 5,600 or 5,650, I think is what a lot of them were.
So were those just NA deals?
Yeah, all NA stuff, for those engines. But now my family early on did a lot of hydroplane engines, and I've built some for some of the guys. But a hydroplane is essentially an airplane wing with a cockpit, and the boat flies, 6 or 8 inches a foot off of the water, and it just, touches on the sponson, and then it's a rudder, it's got a rudder and a skid fin, which makes it turn. That's the hydroplanes you don't see very often, but the unlimited hydroplanes that you had in Seattle, Detroit, stuff like that they ran on the river, those were the ones that would have the big water spray off the side of them and stuff.
What kind of speeds are you seeing with those deals then?
Well, I think my dad wrecked the Miss US in 1976, right? He was testing the boat after they won the Gold Cup, and I think it was 170 miles an hour. He wrecked it at that time. Obviously, those boats are all turbine powered now, and they're, I think, well into the 200 mile an hour range. Oh
crap, that's crazy on water.
Yeah, it's fast. I mean, the V-bottom stuff that we ran, we were limited on an 80 mile an hour, class, and then the Super V-light stuff would run 90 to 100.
Such like an unpredictable surface.
Yeah, it changes every lap.
So weird. Yeah,
every lap. That was the neat thing about the boat race stuff, is I'm so technical, so I would sit there and map out how it was going to run my first lap or two based on the wind and the water and the tide, and what you had tested the day before and saw, so you would pick what props to put.
It's very bracket racer sounding.
It's somewhat. Sure, yeah.
Put your weather station up.
Without a doubt, man, you got to know. And then obviously you get out there, and within a couple laps it's different, because maybe the wind's a little different, or you've got a lot of boat traffic because of a spectator fleet. So yeah, the course would change at all times. You'd be running down the back straightaway, and all of a sudden you'd go flying it through the air, because there'd be a big roller or something. So it was neat, different for sure.
Yeah, they still do a lot of that in Sarasota. They do it like right off the coast of Sarasota. They bring in those big, whatever they are, $10 million rigs with the boats on the side there. That's always cool to see. If people have never seen that, it's awesome.
Yeah, we were just down in the Keys for the World Championships last weekend. But Clearwater's another one. Sarasota's a good one that we raced. I mean, they're all in Florida everywhere. Obviously there's some up north, but Florida, there's a big circuit for them. So
what's the story on this Budweiser boat then? Your dad was racing deal. Was that the one that he wrecked, or is there a deeper story?
Yeah, no, my dad wrecked the Miss US hydroplane in 1976. But my dad was the engine builder for it, So at that time they were running Allison turboed engines, big Allison engines. But my family has always been involved in hydroplane racing. So my godfather raced the Miss Budweiser boat. Butch Cropfeld's my godfather's brother. Jim, Cropfeld raced the Miss Budweiser and stuff. So the whole family's been involved in that, sport.
And then you were like, I want to drag race a little bit.
Yeah,
well, that already going on too.
I stock car raced the longest, probably. Most people don't even know that, but I stock car race. Yeah, personally driving the longest. Yeah.
Really? Which tracks then, like Showtime and
down
here at
all the tracks in Florida, from Hialeah all the way up to Lake City, New Smyrna, Bradenton, obviously now is the Freedom Factory, but it was DeSoto Speedway.
There's a lot of roundy round racing in Florida, I've noticed. I didn't even realize that until the last 4 years, where I was like, wow, there's actually a ton in this area.
It's bigger than it. Well, at one time it was 10 times bigger than any drag racing in Florida. And we'd race every weekend, so you would, that's what you did. You'd points raced, so you had to be there every weekend. And then usually you'd test. So you were twice a week, you'd test on Thursday night and then you'd race on Saturday.
What were those, small block Chevys still?
I ran a couple different classes. The one I ran the most was a modified mini stock, which was a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder.
Oh, that's cool.
Single overhead cam that came in a Pinto and the early Mustangs. So I raced a Mustang, so that's what the chassis was, and then had that little 4-cylinder in it.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, the Fox bodies had those, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they have the?
Yeah, the early ones. Yeah, 2.3s. Yeah.
You'd be hard to find a Fox body without an LS in it, but they pretty much all have been.
Yeah, or race car.
Yeah. Some of those times I see these Fox bodies that are truly cut up race cars where they're not actually using any Fox body stuff, and I'm like, why'd you use a Fox body? You could have just used anything.
Sure.
If you're going to cut all of the Fox body out of it, just get yourself something different.
And people use them all the time now. I mean, it's it's all you see out there, But they work. They're pretty light, and they work pretty good.
What kind of racing does interest you these days? Because the no prep stuff is almost it goes up and down on interest level because the surface is such an equalizer where radial tire racing, the equalizer is a little different.
Yeah.
But
I don't think I could do the no prep stuff too much. I think it's just out of my realm. Like I don't want to chase my tail that much.
We just don't have it in this area either.
Yeah, we really don't. I mean, AJ, that works at the shop there. My right hand guy there, AJ. He wants to do that stuff. He's into it. He watches all those videos. Of them guys running out there on the street and the back end of tracks and stuff. But I feel like those guys are just chasing their tail a lot. If I'm going there, I want to go there to know that I could go there and get the information that I'm trying to go there for. I'm trying to go quicker or work on something. So I don't want to go there knowing the track's not any good, and then I can't get done what I got to get done. So
it's just tough because as a somebody who thinks about viewership and fans, it's hard to watch radial racing, and I understand that because even some of these big radial events, you watch round one and every other car spun the tires.
Sure.
And you're like, that's so hard for a viewer to be entertained by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get past the heat of the day round one before things get good.
I think that's why Pro Mod's so exciting, because usually they make the trip, or they try to make the trip, and that's exciting to watch in itself. I one time, I would stop sometimes and walk away from the pits and go sit in the stands and watch a round of Pro Mod, because for one, it's exciting, and for two, to get away, right, to kind of clear your mind for the next round and stuff like that. But I remember going up there watching one time, and I never film any cars going down the track. I don't do that, but I was total fanboy one time. Jason Shrugs was coming up there, with that red Camaro that he's got, and he bunny hopped the 330 cone, on two wheels. The thing got a little sideways, and he on two wheels went right over the 330 cone. And I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and it blew me away. And when I saw him later that night, I showed him, and he couldn't even believe it. He never even hit the cone, Yeah. So I think something like that's exciting for the fans is the Pro Mod class, because they normally make the trip. They're obviously really fast, and they give their best shot at making the trip, so.
That is definitely important, is seeing pairs of cars go down the track constantly. Less tractors is always nice.
Sure.
That's where radial gets a little slack is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tractors, a lot of complaining about track surfaces and temperatures and gummy track and gooey and all this stuff, and it gets tough where it's those big tire cars, you can say what you want about them, but they don't worry about that stuff. Same with No Prep Kings. That's why that series does so good.
Yeah.
They get down the track.
Sure.
And they're going pretty much as fast as some of these Pro Mods.
Yeah. I think the track surface thing, I hate when people go up to the track guys and they say, well, the track was this or the track was that, because we're all having to deal with the same track. And it's all really good. These guys don't know what bad tracks are. These new guys racing, so all the tracks, at least the good tracks,
Unless you have fluid, you really can't complain.
100%, and the reality is you go up there and the guy in front of you knock the tires off, well, then you need to move over, or don't, just move over, and aim the car so it lands in the center of the groove, you got to have those conversations with the guy that's driving the car maybe before you roll them in there,
A lot of people at BMP I see do that. They pull up and they go right into the groove that's getting a little bald. Sure. Instead of realizing that just shift one tire size over.
Sure.
Wade preps it the whole way.
Oh yeah, Wade's killer, man.
Yeah,
Wade's the best. Wade's been the best thing that ever happened to those drag racers out there now, you know what I mean?
And he's been radial prepping at every track in all of Georgia, Florida, everywhere. He's
20 years, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's a long time.
That man knows radial prep for sure.
He knows all prep, to be honest with you. He understands he understands what's going on, right? So the same thing with us with the engines or this or that. We look at every little piece of the puzzle and try to understand that piece, that puzzle piece, So he gets that, And then I think once you get a guy that understands what's underneath that layer of rubber and everything else, and how to treat it during different conditions, obviously summer, winter, dewy, not dewy, there's a lot of water drains or not, all that plays a huge factor.
I've seen plenty of times where they're talking about 150-degree track temp and it's still hooking because he changes his tune-up during the day, which is crazy that he has different tune-ups in his own brain on like what temperature is doing what, and as the sun's going down, like there's a real science to it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But as you as a tuner and driver, if the track goes to shit, that could be a good thing for you because you could read it right and the other guys could suck.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of instances where we didn't have the fastest car, but we won the race because, we could get down the racetrack consistently,
Yeah.
So I always was very good at that. I always would make sure that I had multiple tune-ups, Like I obviously save all of our tune-up stuff, but I would always make sure that we had good understanding of what that tune-up would run during the conditions, So like, on Sunday, if the sun was dead on it, we were the fourth round of cars to go out, and it's 1 o'clock before first round, I mean, it's a lot different than rolling out there at 10 o'clock, you know what I mean? So, in July,
And this was no traction controls, no.
Oh, yeah.
But also, if you hit traction control in a radial car, you're probably losing anyways if you get into the traction control.
It depends. I mean, they're so good now. As long as you have the plot dead on top of it, to where, like if you're within rounds. So like if you're testing, you don't run the plot dead on top of it, like guys do, but it's the wrong thing to do, because then when you try to go faster, you run into things or you run into a wheelie control or something like that. It happens all the time. So I get rid of those things or move them way, way out of the way when we're testing. But when you're going into eliminations, you have to go through all of those tune-ups and make sure that you have your drive shaft curve and your traction control, obviously plotted down on the line so it doesn't try to run through a hole in there,
Yeah, the systems have become so good too. It's crazy the difference I'm sure you've seen in 10 years of what people can do with an EFI system is just...
Yeah, the magnets on the drive shaft have gotten a little bit more over the years for sure.
Yeah, there's a couple more on there.
There's a few more on there.
You can actually see what's going on instead of like, well, you could see at 60 feet and then at 100 feet.
Oh yeah, we had to smooth them all out all the time, because it was pretty rough. It looked like stairwells, sometimes.
That's funny. Now you can really see what's going on down track. I see these tuners now too. They don't need to watch a video or anything.
Yeah, I mean,
they just know what it did.
Yeah. I mean, you could look. I mean, well, if you know what the car is doing, right, and it's, lap after lap, you got a handle on it. Like, Brett Steele, Job tunes it, and, Jay looks over it, makes sure we don't do anything stupid and step on her foot or nothing, but like, Job could tune it, from sitting in his couch, because he knows what the car is going to do. Obviously, it tells you everything as long as you understand that,
Yeah, there's shock sensors on all four corners. You know every pressure of everything. And
you got to know the rate that it's doing it. You got to visualize. I think that's the thing, too, is, you have to visualize what the car is maybe doing, but you really have to understand every aspect of those functions, and if you don't, then you just chase your tail a little bit,
I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was telling me about his burnout car, and he was like, I'll show you the data log later. And I was like, I don't want to see a 1.5-minute data log. I don't got time for that. I look at like a 7.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's a long-ass data log.
I tell you, man, I did it, though, sometimes, like the race pack deal, particularly, say, the carbureted cars, we would activate the race pack deal before the burnout. If you were having a problem stumbling or this or that, or you never know what it is, so you just turn it on before the burnout. And
that's funny. You guys always turn them on from the back like that. The first time I saw somebody doing that, I was a little confused. I was like, wait, doesn't the car just do that? Like, once I see wide open throttle, it just starts.
Yeah, no.
Starts logging.
No, yeah, there's always a little delay in it. So then the problem is I call them dummies, the drivers. Putting the dummy in the driver's seat. You try to limit what they have to do.
That's pretty accurate, yeah.
I was always pretty good with all of my drivers. Because that's part of the game. If I don't have enough to beat the guy next to me, enough numbers to beat the guy next to me, then I'm going to need to rely on you to give me some of those numbers. So you need to be able to go in there and go, hey, I need you to tighten it up this round, or hey, I don't need you to do anything. Just do what you did last round, or you can even loosen up a little bit for me, So, that was obviously part of you know.
Yeah, you're kind of a coach at that point too.
You're a coach. You're putting the dummy in it, and bro, there'd be so many instances where they'd make a lap and you'd get back and there'd be no race back data, you know, and you're like, hey, bro, you know, what was with that, you know, but Troy, you know, Junior, he'd always go up there and hit his. He liked it. You know, obviously he's a driver. He could do it all on his own. But I had plenty that couldn't. So that's when the button, obviously.
Yeah, as a driver, I have a pretty good system. You know, after the burnout, intercooler goes on, visor goes down, pull the belts one more time, and then it's a turbo car. So you're just like grabbing first gear 6 different times. You know, like make sure it's in first gear.
Sure.
That's always the joke. You're like waiting for the nitrous guy to like purge all their intercooler and stuff, and you're just like. Yeah, I'm still in first. All right,
ready to go. Yeah.
Pretty much the extent of it. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I mean, you want to limit obviously what you have to do in there, so you don't have to worry about anything else. You know, and then you know once you become comfortable, once you're falling asleep in the staging lanes, you know you're so comfortable, then you can be really good. You know.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. Is I've talked to some drivers, and I'm always curious, like. Do you feel hyper energized right before your pass? Are you super calm? Are you like where is your mind at? Because I'm usually pretty calm. Like that's normally like the calmest I'll be.
Yeah.
And the adrenaline isn't as much. But I feel if you have too much adrenaline, it's not okay either. Like you almost want no adrenaline and be in your calm, normal state of mind.
Yeah, emotionless. You know, like you can't have any emotions going in there, you know. You got to be, I think you got to be completely calm. You know, I always like to have the guys get in the car early. You know what I mean? Just get in your area.
That's tough too, is like an oil down and then you get out and then like the oil down's done and then you're like scrambling.
Sure.
If you're like, I've put on my gloves like in the burnout box before and I hate that stuff.
Yeah.
That'll throw you off so quickly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's fun to try to throw off other drivers.
People. Yeah. That's
like the guy in the lane next to you is fun.
I love it, you know? Like as simple as like, you know, simple things, walking in front of their car, you know, or standing there. And then, you know, I mean, like all kinds of little things that you could play mind games with, going in the lights on them. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the best when you win on a whole shot because of a starting line, little mind game thing.
Yeah, I threw James off the other day. He went red against me.
Yeah,
I got in his head pretty bad.
Yeah, I love it. You could do that.
I don't think I got in his head at all. I think he was just trying to put so much on me.
Yeah,
and I think he was trying to put such a gap on me that he wanted like a 00 or a 000, and it was a bad move.
Yeah, it was a bad move on his part. It was bad racing, bro.
A half a second faster car.
I'd have gone on him for it, bro. He never told me that. It's a good thing.
He went red right on. Yeah.
Oh, bro.
I know, it was pretty rough. I was like, man, you're going to go red against a slower car?
His crew chief didn't give him good advice.
Yeah.
You know?
That was a bad move.
Bad move, Nate.
Yep. Nate was pissed at him, too, because he's like, Cooper's car is like a 5.0 480 car.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I mean, like, you know, a good example of that's like watch Brett race, you know? I mean, you know, we could go really fast, but sometimes we don't have to, you know, so you don't, you know. It's hard to slow down a fast car too slow, but, you know, you just do it to where you're consistent. And the same thing with the light, you know? I mean, if you got the guy covered, you know, give yourself a little bit, you know?
Yeah, have a tune-up that'll get down on a shitty surface is part of it, too. I've seen so many people heat of the day tune up and they throw the beans at it and it just it's not going to work like that. You got to race the surface. 100%. You can't just race the car next to you. You got to race that surface a little bit. It's pretty fun. It's a fun sport in that aspect of people have to make a judgment call and then stick with it.
Oh yeah.
You see the guys with the laptop out in the lanes and you're like, "Oh man."
Yeah, I never tried to bring it. I did for a little while there. I was bringing it up there often, and then I tried to stop because, you know, you second guess yourself quite often. The nitrous cars, we could change them, you know, on the fly. But, you know, I would always go up the round before, the class before and look at it and see how it looked. Because it's usually going to be about the same, you know, as long as it's not a front wheel drive car in front of you, you know, like it was going to be, you know, about the same. So.
Yeah. So how do you handle when, like, you know, I get my engine done by you, for example, and, you know, I put it in my car and then I have like the wrong tuner on it and just doing everything wrong in the engine. Do you just like, I don't know, that's a tough one because you could just be like, I don't know, man, like, you know, you had one pass on it, it broke, but like,
yeah,
the blame game in racing is huge.
Huge.
Everybody wants to blame Usually the converter guy I see a lot of. Like
Engine guy for sure.
engine guy probably gets a lot of that too.
Yep.
The thing won't spool or something like that. Like how do you manage those expectations?
Well, I think a lot of it is educating the customer, right? And I think that's what a lot of guys in the industry don't do well. You know, when someone calls me and they have a problem, and it's all the time, you know, I mean, this is all the time that you have a customer that calls and they always have a problem. The first thing is I ask questions, you know, I ask them, you know, start from the beginning and tell me what happened, right? And if you do that, in a lot of instances, customers will just talk and tell you, you know, and they'll tell you what they did wrong, and they just don't know, you know. And it's not always that instance, right? I mean, like engines break, transmissions break, converters break, right? Everybody has a problem every once in a blue moon.
Well, you have to manage those expectations too. If people think they can make 2,000 horsepower and it just like all be fine and dandy forever.
Sure, yeah, and it's not always the case, you know. So
shouldn't be. That's crazy if that's the case.
Yeah, it's not, you know. So I think really it's just educating the people. Like I get the question all the time, well, how do I know when to freshen up one of these engines? You know, okay, I bought this from you. How long can I run it for before it needs to be freshened? Well, I have no idea. I can't tell you that. You know, it might be in a 4,000-pound car. It might be in a 2,400-pound car. It might have a lockup. It might have an open converter.
Yeah.
You know, he might have a single turbo. He might have twins, you know. I mean, and all of those things would act differently on that engine, right? One has more heat than the other. One applies more load than the other, right? So it's all going to be a different factor. So, for instance, you know, how to know when to freshen an engine up, you should read your coolant pressure and your crankcase pressure sensors. So when you get an engine in, you should run it at the track on low boost, you know, short passes to the 330 first, make sure it's happy, and get all of that data to where the engine's well within its realm of being happy, you know, and not pissed off, and then run off of those numbers. So, you know, in a year from now, if your coolant pressure is almost to where your boost is at, you're about to lose the head gasket, you know, it's time to put a head gasket on it.
If you got a 2J and you're seeing those two numbers similar,
it's
yeah.
Gonna
be dangerous.
It's getting ready to be dangerous, you know. And then, you know, the crankcase pressure, you know, do you start to see it huffing a little bit more? You know, the problem with just that visual deal is if it's winter time and there's a lot of moisture in the air, visually you could see it, you know, so people think that it needs to be freshened. So crankcase pressure sensor will tell you that, you know, when that number starts to go up, it needs rings in it, you know, or pistons, and you know, as well, you know. So that's really the thing, man. It's just educating the customer on how to monitor the information that they're getting, how to take care of them, when to change the oil, how to start them and run them. You know, don't just start them and go run it and do a burnout. Let the thing come to temperature. You know, just common sense stuff. But sometimes guys don't, you know, always remember that kind of stuff. They think that these are like a little Kia. You could just go out there, start it, and drive it down the road. And in some instances, they are. But, you know, I mean, when you get to the bigger power stuff, it needs to be treated a little bit different.
And it's interesting, too, because you're building big power in real street cars. So you can't just treat it like it's still, like it may look and feel like it's just a stock car, but then you have to realize like it's like race car power numbers. Like when you sell somebody like an X275 engine, those guys, they know. It's no secret. But, you know, if suddenly now you make 1,200 horsepower on your, you know, Coyote or GTR street car, it's a very different thing than you're used to.
Sure.
It's not the Ford change the oil every 4,000 miles, whatever, doesn't matter type of thing. So you almost have to re-educate.
Yeah. A lot of them don't even know. You know, a lot of them don't even know. A lot of them have just come across this new hobby, you know, that they're wanting to get into, and they don't know. They don't understand that you have a catch can on the car now, right? You're going to have some, if it's on an ethanol fuel, you know, you're going to have that smell, right? You might hear a little bit of valve train noise, you know. These are just some things that you got to educate them on, you know, a little bit.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, especially like 2Js, you know, now it's doesn't really matter as much because they're old. Like, like if
Yeah.
you have a 2J car, you kind of have to understand, like, you
What
have
you're
a
getting into.
35-year-old car at this point.
Yeah, it's like an old hot rod.
Yeah, it pretty much is now. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy to think about it like that, but
So it is, yeah.
they're kind of a relic in a way because as cool as they are, they're not modern. They're missing out on a lot of the modern stuff. I mean, we were just talking about my car, and this is the struggle I have a lot, is to get that next 3/10 off my car that I want to get, 4/10 off my car. Yes, I could do it with a 2J, but reliability and time in the engine bay that the engine sits goes down.
Sure. Yeah. As it goes faster, the factory casting stuff starts to be more of a problem. You know, obviously we're not dealing with new castings on these things. You know, so can you build a 2J to do what you want to do? 100%. You know, I mean, without a doubt, you can. But it's different. You know, I mean, it's got to be done a little bit different. And then it's got to have a service cycle. You know, because you're going to be going faster. You know, so the thing will be out a little bit more frequently, you know, just to make sure that it's happy, you know.
Well, horsepower per cubic inch.
Yeah.
As that number rises on any motor, it's just a easy number to think about. It's like, it's hard on a motor. Like those Hondas, they're broken all the time for that reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's why you don't touch Honda motors.
I think it's heat, you know. I think that's like the real thing that you're talking about, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, now the horsepower goes up per cubic inch, but the heat goes up substantial, you know. So, and that's what it's all about, is dissipating the heat, or managing the heat, I should say. You know, so
We all run ethanol too, so it's not the coolest running fuel ever. It's a lot cooler than most, but it's not M1.
It's for every engine. So if it's a gas engine, you know, a nitrous gas engine, or if it's a, you know, blown Hemi on alcohol, you know, M1 or M5 deal or something, it's all the same. It's all about managing heat. Right? You might see a Hemi go into the water box and it's blowing fuel out the pipes. You know what I mean? And they're doing that to keep the castings cool, you know, because they're going to have to manage this amount of heat that they're getting ready to sustain, you know. So that's just an example of it, you know.
Yeah. And on all that, you're thinking about heat, and that's why EGTs have become so big. And
yeah, they've always have been. But, you know, that same principle goes down the line, you know. I mean, we think about heat when we're talking about piston rings, you know. We think about heat when we're talking about valve seats, when we're talking about valve guides or bearings, or, you know, I mean, there's you got to think about all of it, you know.
Well, you got to be like a detective too when a broken engine comes in.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's probably part of it. Everybody stands around and tries to figure out what.
Yeah, I mean, the teardown guy is one of the most important guys. You know, Nick takes all the engines apart, and, you know, he has to, if he sees something that's not right, or a wear pattern that's, you know, you could find a bent crank or a main housing bore that's not perfectly straight, a rod, you know. And then one of the things with that is, what do you learn from that? So to give you an example, like wrist pin clearance, you know, if you send it out at 1,000 and it comes back at 1,500, well, the next time you send it out, just put it at 1,500, and then when it comes back, it'll be there, you know, because it's worn to that area where it wants to be happy, where it's flexing and it's removing some material, and then that's where it wants to ride. So, like, you know, that's just an example of what to look for, you know, and how you could, you know, like the mains on the crankshaft we were talking about, the center mains. We put more clearance there because we saw that it's touching down in that area. So in order to mitigate that, you put more clearance there. Well, then it doesn't touch down as much, you know. Well, then we start going faster, it touches down again, you know. So anyways, that's what it's about, is obviously seeing it and then doing something about what you see. Don't just take it apart and keep moving, you know.
And an engine that's built for longevity won't be built for power, and a power engine won't be built for longevity. So that's probably a flip side as well. Like, if you got aluminum rods in your engine, you got to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, you have to put the failure cycle into account, you know, for all of these parts, you know. That has to be considered, you know, for whatever you're doing. You know, if we're doing an offshore race boat that's got to run for an hour wide open, you know, or a road race car, you know, or you're going to do an 1/8 mile drag car, you know, that's only got to run for 3.8 or 4 It's on the seconds. You know, I mean,
That's why I hate half mile too. I am very anti half mile.
it's crazy because I'm kind of getting interested in the land speed stuff. You know, Jay's been doing some of it. It's really one of the only things that I have not done. You know, so I'm a little intrigued by it. I've
Yeah, the Bonneville stuff's cool.
It's really cool. I wish it wasn't so far. You know, because God, I don't really want to get into it all again. You know, you got to get the whole 9 yards to go do it. So
and you need an entire trailer that can fit basically a
everything twice
25-foot long vehicle in it.
Yeah, sure.
The one that Jim works on all the time, like that thing's huge.
Yeah, it's big. The one that Jim and Jim fabricated some stuff on.
Yeah, Jim and Jay are messing with that one, and it's cool. The half mile stuff's really, or the standing, whatever they call it, the land speed.
Yeah, land speed stuff.
They do like
Bonneville. Yeah,
I don't know, 20 miles or something crazy. It's like endless. It seems like.
Yeah, the Bonneville's 5 miles, and then you've got El Mirage is 3 miles, 3.5 mile deal.
Yeah, that's nuts because they're the 200-mile-an-hour club out there would be cool to be.
That'd be amazing.
A part of.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to kind of do. You know, is I'd love to get into that or something, but like I said, it's hard. You know, you got to kind of. Jay's got a good thing going because he's got a crew over there, and they keep the cars over there. You know, and they come over here just to get tightened up. And
yeah, it's kind of like a old boys club out there too, from what it seems like. Like it's just guys that are in it. They're all older guys for the most part, and like it's
a lot of camaraderie there. You know,
yeah,
it's cool because that's really what built the whole thing. You know,
Jim was telling me that even like if you have a car that can go break a record right away, they do it in increments just to like keep it fun and interesting. They don't just like go and do it.
Well, you don't want to go wreck it, you know, because then it's kind of unattainable for a lot of people, you know. So if you
like they don't want to wreck the record,
right? Yeah. They don't want to wreck the record, not the car.
So they just like leave it as like, oh, you know, we'll get it next time, even though they could have.
I think they did that. The one old boy was driving the car and he just ran down through there for all she had, just about, you know, and he overshot it by probably 35 or so mile an hour, you know, and it was like. Oh, yeah. You know, he took a lot of opportunity for other guys to make laps, you know. So
that's so funny because in radial racing, if you can go in there and put 30 miles an hour on a guy, you're going to do it and post about it all day.
Oh yeah, bro, I'm standing on him. Yeah, no doubt.
It's so funny. There's no there's camaraderie like that. You know, people will give you the parts off their car if you put them out first round for the most part, but it's not the same at all.
No. When I go to the drag strip, it's on. You know, it's a war. So,
but then once you're out first round, you probably end up.
Yeah, I don't plan on that ever.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I've been put out first round more times than I'd like to.
Yeah, I'm loading up and leaving.
Yeah, you're just out.
Oh yeah, I'm not playing that game. Yeah,
not that guy.
No way, bro. I'm not hanging out for the pictures.
Well, then you go do a drag and drive, and it's complete camaraderie. Everybody's trying to help each other as much as possible because you're in this pain cycle of it. And that's a whole nother world you got to build engines for is drag and drive guys that are like, yeah, I want 2,500 horsepower, but then I got to go drive it 1,000 miles. And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
I'm going to change over the fuel and everything. And Brett's car obviously won that too.
Yeah.
We joke he's got his infinity gauntlet of wins this year, his Thanos level of...
It was a pretty good year.
I mean, it was World Cup, it was FL2K, TX2K, drag and drive. It's...
Yeah, we did it. We had a good year. We worked hard, you know. I mean, the whole group worked really hard, and it came together, and we had a good year.
Yeah, you know? That thing's impressive. But with my car, we were talking. I don't know where to go. My engine's obviously out right now, as a lot of people saw, and it's like, I want to stick with you guys on an engine program.
Right.
But I don't know if it'll be 2J forever. I've accomplished all my 2J goals that I've ever had. I've won races. I've went rounds.
How fast has the car gone?
It went 176, and it went 480 in the 8th, and it went 768 with a power glide.
Right.
Wrong trans.
Right, yeah, completely wrong transmission.
Completely wrong transmission. I need one more gear.
I mean, you know, the problem is a lot of guys are going to be, you know, it just depends on what they're going to do with all the classes, right? You know, I have a lot of customers that could go probably 670s, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty easily. And
those customers probably mostly have Coyotes?
Yeah. I mean, they all have Coyotes in them, you know? So, you know, the problem is I think they have to find a way to limit some of that class because I think once you step over going 750s or faster, it becomes a lot more difficult. Sure, there's guys going 20s and 30s and stuff like that, but like consistently 750 or faster, it starts to take a different car, a different mentality, a different crew, a different effort.
Yeah, you got to get a lot more serious.
It's the reality, right? And the car will become less consistent if you don't have all of these things. So the fun aspect goes down drastically if you don't have all of that stuff. So, I think I've seen it happen in the past where guys have been in your situation and they thrive to go faster, and then they lose the fun of it because the reliability goes down, the consistency goes down, the effort goes up, the financial effort goes up, So I think if there was a class that, we could keep the numbers somewhat in check, and however that would need to be, I don't know, whether it's a turbo limited size, whether it's a tire size, whether it's, I don't know, right? I don't know what the answer is.
It needs some rules.
It needs
some tightening up a little bit.
Yeah.
Honestly, I like the idea of 8th mile street car a little bit because my car is actually competitive in the 8th mile with a lot of these cars.
Yeah.
But then out the back, I just don't have the mile an hour. I don't have the power to just like dump in it, but I can short track as hard as like 80% of the street cars.
Well, I wonder if we talk about an 8th mile street class. Yeah, you could have a quarter mile Kings class, or whatever, if that's where you want to get in. But the same speed cars could run an 8th mile deal, no double entries, and let's get it on. It's an 8th mile street class. I don't know the answer, but it puts you more in contention to win, right? Just as an example, what happened, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, because like I have a bunch of friends with street cars, and a bunch of them have 10 miles an hour on me in the 8th, same ET, and then they have 25 miles an hour on me in the quarter, and I'm like, we're almost next to each other.
Yeah.
You just can't 60 foot and 330 hard.
Yeah.
But then you just dump power into it, and that's easy. I kind of like the idea of like you have to struggle for it a little bit. You have to hit it really hard right off the hit, or else you lost.
Well, and it's safer, right? So then we're talking about how fast these cars are. Jim out there going 200.
So easy on the engine.
Grocery getter. I mean, that's dangerous, dude. It's fast, So like there's a lot of other guys out there like him, So if you limit it to an 8th mile deal, for one, it gets safer at those weights. And for two, a lot of like our crankshaft failure problems, with that stock crank stuff, we've only seen because of the quarter mile deal, So the engines last longer, they're happier,
The racing's usually closer too.
It's closer.
You can be a better driver and win a lot easier.
And it turns the car around the neck. So in other words, from run to the next group of running, guys running is less, the shutdown, the whole 9 yards, So you could turn more cars as far as like Victor's concerned throughout the day. You can make more laps, which keeps the program moving.
A lot of people hate on 8th mile, in like people that watch my videos usually hate on 8th mile.
Yeah.
They just want to see like a big mile an hour at the quarter and stuff. But
sure.
I don't know, once you do it, like if you're actually driving that car, there's nothing more enjoyable after that first 8th mile. You're just holding on.
Yeah, you're holding on for life.
You're like, I hope nothing lets go now.
Yeah, you got a lot of time to think. The 8th mile, I'm an 8th mile guy, obviously everything I've ever raced was 8th mile. So the quarter mile stuff, you got a lot of time to think,
Yeah, you start to, I just start to worry on that back end.
Start looking around.
Yeah. I'm like, what's that smell? What's that noise?
Yeah, for sure.
It starts to get, scarier because you're just like, there's nothing more up here.
What's that vibration? Or, of course. Yeah.
There's nothing more at that other 8th mile. It doesn't get any more magical.
No, and it's fast. I mean, me and Brett were talking about it. He's like, man, that 225 is a little quick. It's fast. I said, sure it is, dude. 3,000 pounds. I'm sure it is.
You see that C5 that came back out in Ultra Street? That one, that red one? And it went like a full...
just recently, right?
Yeah, it went like a full 10th faster than everybody else. Was like, oh man, because they went in with the IRS rules and they were able to be a little lighter.
Yeah.
And I started to think, I was like, man, I wonder if that C5 is also just super aerodynamic compared to some of the other cars in that class.
Plays a factor. It's not a huge factor in that class.
But when you're talking numbers.
But when you're talking a couple numbers, it is. I know when we would take the engine out of the Nova and put it in the Camaro, it would be like 3 or 4 miles an hour difference,
Yeah, and that's just 8th mile.
Yeah, and that's just 8th mile. Obviously, we wouldn't run it quite as hard.
And they're running like 140 or 150 something. So
yeah,
good mile an hour. I'm curious, like, if a more aerodynamic car should almost have a little bit more weight on it.
Well,
it's tough.
Yeah, that's a hard one. You know, that's a tough one because how do you determine that? You know, I always there's a deal like people get upset with like one guy winning all the time. You know, it's like how do you stop that one guy from winning? You know, and there's never really been a good way of doing that because we talked about it. Winners win. You know.
Yeah.
But I always thought that if you won, you know, however many races, if you won 3 races in a row, you know, well, maybe you needed to carry 50 pounds or something, you know, and because I always wanted to see other guys win, or I always wanted to see other guys have a shot at winning, you know, I mean, at least, you know, so I don't know if you could implement things like that into that streetcar class or not, but, you know, something.
It would almost come down to like, because you can win, but you weren't the fastest car that day. So if you happen to win a bunch, but you weren't the fastest car, you just happen to have the best ability to go A to B and win. It's tough to tell somebody they got weight.
Dude, it's always a bad conversation. I mean, it never goes over good.
Well, you always get a lead trophy if you win at Ultra Street.
Oh, 100%, bro. They change the rules all the time.
Yeah, the lead trophy, as they call it. And when you win, you get lead.
We had all kinds of stuff for a while with some high port heads, raised runner, you know, intake runners. And we had one deal one time where there was 3 different runner heights on a head, and it was all the same casting. You know, so how would you know, you know, that you'd have to pull the thing apart and check. And
so you're almost like hunting for like a factory freak in a way, where you're trying to get like just the right deal. And I made a high port tall runner head, you know, raised runner head into a low runner head, and then took the weight break one time. And we just filled the whole floor with epoxy and made the short side long and stuff. Yeah, that's where it's tough too, because anybody can read those rules and figure out their own way to try to optimize it.
Yeah,
there's 10 different ways to read the rule book. And you know, James races that car in Ultra Street, and it's not the most competitive right now. Like, it's kind of middle of the field. And they kind of, like, over the winter, I'm sure they're going to take a swing and try something different, because they kind of have to. Yeah, you have to either change something. I know you're saying the same thing. If you're not their number one qualifier, you're changing something.
Yeah. If we're getting ran over, right, we're changing stuff. I mean, the only thing that I could say, though, is we do stay to the combination. You know, like, I've always been a proponent for sticking with the combination. You know, so, like, that's why I was asking, how fast do you want to go with your car? Because here we are talking about picking up ET, you know, putting a different engine in, it's expensive. Changing the turbo system, right? I mean, like, you know, there's a lot of expense added to that. Maybe a different fuel system. You're talking about a V8 maybe, you know, like all these things. So I think that's one of the reasons why you could use someone like say Brett, you know, as an example, you know, right? He started with that thing driving around on the street, you know, going to work in that car, and he hasn't stopped. And it's all the same stuff. It's always twin turbo. It's always been a Coyote platform, right? It's always been the same stuff.
But within reason, because Jim started with a Ford Focus. You wouldn't have told him to stick with his platform.
Well, that's for sure. I did the engine in the Ford Focus for him, actually, you know, so that's how long ago that was.
Yeah. You wouldn't have said, no, just keep pushing on the Focus. You'll eventually get there.
You're not wrong there.
Within reason.
Within reason, yeah, 100%, you know, 100%.
So, like, yeah, you know, you start with a Coyote. That's a good platform to start with.
Sure. I mean, the 2J deal, like your deal, you could pick up ET by changing the transmission in the car, you know, and converter and how it wants to run it, right? You could take some weight out of the car. There's definitely plenty of weight to come out of it. We were looking at the suspension on the car just a minute ago, right? And boom, 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 boom. There's a few things there that we could 60 harder. So there's no doubt that you could do it with all the stuff that you currently have. Yeah, you might have to buy a transmission.
It's going to be really hard to 60-foot much harder without just breaking parts, though, I feel like. I mean, that car's been 115, 60-foot pretty consistently.
Oh, it'll go faster than that.
But at 3,200 pounds, it's going to start to be hard on stuff.
It'll do it all day, dude. You know, all day.
I definitely trust you on that.
You know, it will. But you have to get a transmission and a converter that's going to allow it, you know. So it's going to flash the converter correctly and stuff like that. The right gear ratio to do that, you know. And then the car, I mean, there's no wishbone on it, like you still have a panhard bar on the car, right?
Yeah.
And stuff, so like all that stuff needs to get changed, and it'll instantly go 110, 11, to the 60 right out of the gate. So there's 5 numbers, right? Well, that 5's 7 or 8 on the other end, for you quarter-mile kings, and and that's just in just that, right? What about the transmission, right? And, taking some load off of the engine and adding another gear and, allowing the converter to work a little bit better and stuff like that. You're going to pick up quite a bit of mile an hour and quite a bit of ET. Anytime you could turn more revolutions from point A to point B, the faster you're going to go. It's just how the game is,
Like tighter gear ratios and stuff on a 2J goes a long way.
Oh, 100%.
On any car, really.
Almost on any car.
Yeah.
Unless it's one that likes a lot of load, on it or something. But, that thing doesn't. I could promise you that, know. So an example is you could probably take and put a little bit more effort into what you have and probably go a little bit quicker, I
just know my only worry is breaking that motor is almost as expensive as doing a different combination. Like if I scatter the rods out of that thing and tear up the head, that's pretty much as expensive as just swapping a different motor in.
Well, just don't do that.
That's the goal.
Yeah, just don't do that.
I mean, last time it was out, I didn't do that, and
Yeah.
the block was too ruined, and the crank was bent.
Yeah.
So that was already scrapped.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, do you sell it all before you do that?
Well, one of the things that I did when we were racing and we talked about changing the combination is I figured out what it costs to make a lap in the car, So like we're running aluminum rods. So like our big expense at the time was aluminum rods and rings and valve springs, that was our biggest expense, because we were getting pistons on the deal, So fuel, nitrous at the time, so like anyways, we broke it down into how much it cost per lap. And then I figured up, if it made sense to convert over, maybe this other engine, I could get more laps out of it without freshening it up. What's that look like? What's that going to mean? So that's how I always made that decision. But you have to account for going to the track also, right? What's it going to take to put a combination in your car and get right back to where you're at and have all those same tune-ups to where you could go out there and run consistently like you can? So that takes time and effort, right? And expense, so that's not going to happen at one track outing. That's going to take 4, 5, 6, who knows, outings, right? To get back to where you feel like you're having fun, you're consistent, you have a weapon to be able to go to the track and race, and do good. So that's something you have to consider also when...
Yeah, the learning curve of a new combo is definitely real.
It's the real deal, you know? So, and sometimes it could pay off really good, right? And then sometimes it can't. To give you a fine example of that, like Lund's car,
Yeah. You guys built the engine in Lund.
Did the engine
car.
in it, and my buddy Ryan Eckert did the turbo kit on it with those guys, and it was essentially, this is what they had been doing. Let's look at it. What had you learned, and what can we implement? And Ryan did the kit. I did the engine. Senior, did obviously all the wrenching on the car and all some of the designing of it and everything else. Mm-hmm. And Junior, did all the tuning. And we went to Troy Perez's race out here, that no time race, to test it. And we tore the transmission up, the converter, within 2 laps, And then they wanted to go to a World Cup. And I'm like, you're crazy, Because like me, I got to know all my tune-ups. I got to know, how fast everybody's going to be going, what I know. I got to feel comfortable.
Yeah, because it's a big expense.
It's a big expense. It's a big haul up there or anywhere. Like whenever I would go racing, I always wanted to know what I had. I wanted to feel confident in what I was doing, and what I was bringing to the table. But those guys had all the confidence in the world, So they went up
for them.
Yeah, they went up there, and I think the first lap on the engine, full lap was like 7:20s or 30s or something. Then it went at 7:13, and it just kept going faster and faster the whole weekend. But that's a fine example of it's all almost the same parts. It's still a Coyote, It's just a little bit different Coyote engine. Same twin turbo deal, just a different design twin turbo deal, you know. It's just more refined.
Yeah.
You know?
And then
so
they had it at Blacklist. They did a bunch of the chassis stuff.
the rear end stuff,
Yeah.
and they had that before this iteration,
Yep.
you know. But that was a part of the thing and confidence that they had going up there is they knew that the thing was going to leave, and they knew the tune-ups on the suspension, that the car was going to separate at a certain rate, that it was going to do what it needed to do. You know, and I didn't have that confidence in them going up there because I hadn't seen the car do it, you know.
Yeah.
But after seeing it, I've got all the confidence in the world in them, you know, because they knew what it was going to do.
It sounds really happy with that trans in there too. Like it stays in RPM really well. Like it shifts like a couple times going down track, which engines obviously like if you can get that many gears into a trans.
It's going to be even better. Senior was over at the shop yesterday talking about it and a game plan to go test it, you know. I think there's quite a bit more there. I actually think there's actually a lot more there, to be honest with you. So
Wow, that'll be cool to see that car go that much faster. I mean, everything else can do it. It's really just about the trans. Like the turbos and engine, that's obviously very proven in other cars. It's just if you can get enough power through that transmission, which is stock trans, like.
Well, that they have a good handle on that, obviously. I think they have finally, over the years, figured out what those transmissions like, what keeps them alive, the nuisance of them, but also the little things, the couple little key things that make the difference, you know. And obviously all the hard work that they've put into it, they figured that out, you know.
Yeah, it's a good car. It obviously works really well. That thing's pretty awesome. And just all the Coyotes you do, obviously, I always go back to Jim's car, but his is just so simple.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense in my brain when I'm like,
fast,
you have
yeah.
67 millimeter turbos on there? Like,
Yeah.
This should not be going 200 miles an hour.
It's fast. It's a fast little street car, you know. I've known Jim so long. Like I said, we did the Focus, you know, for him, you know. And his dad's a sweetheart. I mean, his dad's the best.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But even the Coyotes are tough to rule out of classes because of the turbo size stuff. Like a big block to go 200 takes like a T6 turbo.
Sure.
But like a Coyote, you can do it with like a T4 turbo.
Sure.
Or T3s.
Well, I think you could do. That's the thing, right? You're talking about just like buying a Coyote and doing it, right?
If you were just to turbo limit rules.
Well, what if we had a 380-inch big block?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Turn it 11,000 RPMs.
That would sound awesome.
I could get it done just with the same thing, you know. So and then this, small walk forward, just build a smaller one. The cylinder head becomes more efficient. You know what we only have. The good thing about us is we have a good cylinder head with the Coyote deal and small cubic inches, so it just works in that form, you know. But you could take any engine and do what that does. You know, you just got to think about that.
That's pretty interesting. A 380 cubic inch big block.
Well, I mean, anything, you know.
But like a small cubic inch big block does sound pretty cool and alluring with small turbos, so you can fit better classes.
Well, and then you don't have to have some exotic cylinder head. Like a standard conventional 24-degree big block Chevy head becomes a really badass cylinder head because, it's so efficient because you don't have, a massive amount of cubic inches that you're trying to, feed it. So that's, like I said, the Coyote deal works good,
Because that's what we talk about is turbo size being a limiting factor in streetcar classes. T6 is not allowed, of course.
Right.
T4, the biggest you can go. So then you can't have a 600 cubic inch big block because if you try to put T4s on that thing,
it pisses off.
You're gonna kill it with back pressure.
Yeah.
So you kind of limit that a little bit, which makes it a cool deal to think about a small cubic inch high revving big block.
Yeah.
Or super high revving Coyote that goes to 10,000.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy too.
Yeah. 100%,
Lockup on the 2J stuff. Every time I've seen people try to lock up 2Js, I've always seen that as something to avoid a little bit. Small engine lockups. What's your take on all this stuff?
Well, you don't want to turn the crankshaft backwards. So
that does sound dangerous.
It doesn't actually go backwards, but as
out the bottom,
right? As the engine RPMs are increasing, if you turn the lockup on and the engine goes backwards and starts to decrease engine RPMs, that's bad. So, that's what you don't want to do with a small engine. So however you have to run the lockup to not do that, is usually what you have to do, whether it's through gear ratio or, multiple gear ratios, soft lockup, stuff like that. The amount of pressure that it applies to that lockup clutch and whether that lockup clutch locks up 1-to-1, or if it actually slips some, So just because it has a clutch in it doesn't mean like it has to go 1-to-1, you know. So, but when you do that, now you have to service the clutches and stuff like that, So
Because it seems to be hard on every motor that I see hard lockup.
Oh, 100%.
Anytime I see a motor hard lockup, it's like trying to rip the wrist pins out of the piston.
Yeah.
And I've seen that on a few photos of engines trying to do that, and I've seen them actually succeed too pretty well.
Sure. I mean, it's hard on stuff, no doubt. It's hard on everything, rear end gears, like everything,
Yeah, because it just immediately locks the whole engine 1-to-1, torque curve and drive shaft curve, and everything just
comes
meet,
1-to-1, yep.
And then that's when, because people ask me that all the time with my 2J, and I always try to give the most educated answer. They're like, why don't you put a lockup in this thing?
Sure.
And I'm like, well,
yeah,
it's going to be hard on things.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive over my crank probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if the lockup would be the right choice for yours, I think there's a lot more there without having to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because like Jim doesn't have a lockup on his car, but, not apples to apples comparison here, but then Booger had one, but it was pretty hard on it.
Yeah, the lockup's just, it's, for one, you got to learn how to run it, and then for two, an open converter could do a lot of the same things that a lockup can do. But you have to work on it and get it to fluid couple when you need it to do it and guys don't really work on that a lot. Guys look at converter slippage at the finish line, but the race is already over. I was never one that would do that. I always looked at it earlier in the run because that's where it was important, And even to this day, you call a converter company up and they're like, well, what's the converter slippage at the finish line? What does that matter? You're already there.
Yeah.
Like
you want to know, like,
we're already done.
300 feet.
Yeah, I work.
Well, especially you're a nitrous guy, though.
I work from that end, not this end.
But you, as a nitrous guy, you think more about early on, and then the turbo guys think about 800 feet.
Yeah, for sure. So that was always our mentality at it, and I think that was the difference is we'd work on that stuff when other guys didn't,
Yeah, that's short track. I always think about short track too because I don't have power to think about 1,000 feet out. It doesn't really help me at all. I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, and it's usually there. The power, it's always there, right? That's why like a guy comes over, a good tuner will come over and he picks your car up. Mm-hmm. It's not always through the back half stuff. It's usually just applying what you have.
Yeah, using it correctly, and that's where I like 8th mile stuff, like I've been saying. Mm-hmm. Other engines though, so you guys primarily, you said 5 engines you work on.
Yeah.
What 5 are we talking about here?
Well, the Coyote stuff, the 2Js. Mm-hmm. We do some VR38 Nissan GTR stuff.
Those engines are pretty remarkable.
Pretty cool. Yeah, we've been doing those for a long time. 10 years.
Yeah.
So we've been doing those from the beginning of those.
It's a cool engine that so much displacement for its size.
Yeah, it's a pretty big little V6 deal.
Because they go to like what 4.1. Don't you stroke them out to that?
Yeah, we've done 4.4s with them.
That's
so sleeved and stroked. Yeah, and it actually is a pretty good engine. That 4.4, it's a good engine.
I think people don't realize that it's the transmission that really hold those engines back.
Oh yeah,
because they're good.
Yeah.
When you put them with a good trans, like there's a couple turbo 400 guys out there now, and those things are pretty healthy.
They're very technical as far as like all the electronics that are on them, right? Mm-hmm. These fly-by-wire things. I mean, the first race I ever went to, the thing left, and I was helping them pick up some ET, and I said, all right, well, let's try this and this and this, and then it left, and it lifted the front tires up, and it shut the throttle blades, and it started bucking and everything else, and I was like, what was that? The throttle blade shut. I said, how did the throttle blade shut? Like. He let off or something, and he's like, nah, it just doesn't, it's, we were at 70% throttle, and I was like, oh, forget all that, mm-hmm. Let's run it this way from now on, so anyways, those GTRs are neat though. So the GTR engine, The Viper V10, we do some. Cavo's pretty much got his program ironed out now, but every now and then we'll still do some big ones for him and stuff. But he's been doing a lot of like his normal packages, you know.
Yeah, just like a rods pistons type of deal.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Audi V10 deal, you know, and Lamborghini engines, we do those. So those are the 5.
Yeah.
You know, and the 2Js for Victor, obviously.
Yeah.
That's,
Victor's, I mean, he's the only one that does your 2J stuff.
Yeah, it's exclusive
They're
to
all
Victor.
through induction.
Yeah, we've been doing business on those 2Js for 10 years now. Matter of fact, September, I think it was 10 years.
Yeah, he'll send you like 20 at a time.
Yeah, we try to do as many as we can, you know, because they wreck the shop because, you know, they're dirty cores and so you got to check them all for cracks and clean them. And
It'll be exciting once the Dart ones are really in the market. But then the cranks are still a thing, which is my only problem with the Dart block is like,
well, you
they
have
don't
an
come
option.
with a crank.
Yeah, but you have an option to put a, you know, BC crank in it or something like that, which is a great crank. You know, we've used those over the years. And, you know, you do a BC crank in one of those blocks and you've got a good, reliable piece. You know, I think that might be something that we have to discuss with your deal. You know, is there a possibility of working on your combination some and then looking into maybe getting a new cylinder head casting, you know, and a new Dart block from those guys and a new crank. And now we have a stroker, you know, a little more cubic inches, run it a little bit different, you know, and see if we could get enough ET out of it. I guess maybe that's it, enough ET.
My only thing is like, I need a big swing almost to catch up. Like a small swing's not going to catch me very far up. I can probably get 4/10 off my car with just leaning on it harder with a different trans.
Yeah.
But that will still only put me in the 720s, which are still quite not enough to be in that A group competitively.
Right.
And you have to be able to go 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Like that. You have to qualify and then go drive through the class, which is tough to do on a little motor.
It's a thing.
It's hard on them.
Yeah.
I mean, even at FL2K, I knew a bunch of people that broke their stuff, and it's just like no engine build, no package, no this, no that is going to save you from having to lean on your car.
Yeah, you have to. Every one of those guys is trying.
And that's why you don't see many 2Js in Ultra Street or LDR, stuff like that.
No, it's not the engine to race like that kind of stuff with.
But the other flip side is John Sears doesn't really have a great rule set for those cars.
Yeah.
Because I think like you have to have like a 76 millimeter turbo for Ultra Street on a 2J, which is...
At one time, I think you're allowed 1 or 2 stages of nitrous with it. I mean, we thought about doing a 2J, me and Victor, at one time and trying to build an Ultra Street car because the rules were so lucrative. I was like, oh, man, you know, 2 kits I could have on that thing?
Yeah.
I don't care what turbo's on it. I'll make enough to get down through there, you know? Like,
put enough nitrous in it.
Oh, I promise you, bro. Like, that's a terrible decision on their part, you know? But, yeah, that would have been a lot of work for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. Man, what was I going to say? Because the Ultra Street stuff's obviously interesting, but the only 2J car I think in like small tire racing is White Rice.
Yeah, and they
I
work
don't think
hard.
anybody else is doing it.
I mean, that program has been together for a long time, you know. Even before Eric, you know, took that deal over and was running, and I think like they had that program and had been running the 2Js. I think even early on we had sold some pistons to those guys and stuff like that. So like they've been running that same kind of combination for I don't know how long, but a long time.
Yeah, that car's got some laps on it.
It does, and I guess like that whole 2J program, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's another example of even though it beats you down and it's a lot of hard work, sticking with the same core group of parts and just refining them, you know, allows you to be better and a better understanding of it. And, you know, who knows where you could go. Brett at one time said, can you believe we're going to go 7s? I was like, oh, you're going to go way faster than that, bro. You've got no idea, you know, like. And then we were going 730s, and he's like, dude, you think we could go 690s? I was like, you're going to go way faster than that, because I just knew the potential of what I was seeing, how fast these cars were, and they were just street cars, you know, at weight. So I knew once they started applying all of the things that you needed to go fast, it was going to pick up a lot.
And he took a big swing on his new chassis.
Yeah, big swing.
That was a big swing on changing the whole thing to a car that works 10 times better.
100%. But what about, if someone else, what if he goes, all right, well, this was cool. Now let's build another one with everything that we learned.
I already was wondering about that because,
now what do we do, so.
There's always that next step. I mean, somebody like that is probably already looking at LDR or something like that.
Yeah.
For more competitive racing. And everybody always wants the more competitive racing and the bigger challenge. Well, a lot of people want the bigger challenge.
The problem with the competitive heads-up racing is you run into a financial problem with the heads-up racing because it's so consistent. So, like, the thing with the street car class that you guys have, is you have a few races, but you don't have to go to one of them. You could skip one, and you're not out of points or anything like that. Once you get into the heads-up realm, I guess maybe the top of the heads-up realm, you're all in.
Yeah.
I mean, you're missing birthdays, you're missing, holidays, you're doing whatever it takes to be able to do that financially and physically.
Yeah, you're not missing those points.
You're not missing the points, but you're also not missing the opportunity. The opportunity to go test, the opportunity to freshen the engine up, the opportunity, how many of those guys that you see run good, are back on Sunday night, the car's out of the trailer on Monday and it's already apart. So like the heads up deal takes it to a whole new realm.
Yeah. What about those we didn't even talk about like LS stuff. Do you even mess with much LS stuff?
No, I mean, we've built plenty of them. I have one,
Yeah.
in my truck, my C10 deal.
It's a saturated market.
It is. As far as the business is concerned, for, fast forward, it's definitely not production by no means, right? Everyone's a custom engine, built to the best of its ability, but, it's done the way that we do it so we could just perfect it, so we could supply the parts, so we could do all that stuff. The LS market, there's a million guys doing them, right? And one of the things that I don't like is I like to stand out a little bit. I like for someone to appreciate our product for the quality of that product, So I got out of the GTR stuff a little bit. I mean, we still build for some of the customers that, we've built them for, but I don't go after that market a lot because it was so saturated. So many people started building them. It was no big deal, and so I feel like that's kind of how the LS stuff is. With the Coyote game, I still feel like we're at the top end of that scale, of
Your
the guys.
early adopters.
Early adopters of it a little bit. There were some guys that did it before us, but I feel like really perfected it. We were some of those, and, stay on that. Don't stop, We're doing the V10 program now, the Audi, R8 Lamborghini stuff. We're trying to really develop that. That's like our next thing that we're putting a lot of effort in to try to understand how those things really work.
Those are crazy too because it seems like every one is twin turboed.
Yeah,
like every Audi I see, every Lamborghini, I'm like, they all have twin turbo kits?
Yeah, they all do. And the crazy thing is the stock engines are great in them, and then when someone builds the engines in them, they're really kind of subpar, at that point, because I don't think anybody has a really good grasp of them. Obviously they work, guys build them. I've built plenty of them, we build for a lot of the top guys in that thing. A lot of it's private labeled, but, it's just understanding it and really knowing what's going on,
Another engine we talked a little bit about too, me and Jim, we were talking about the new LT engine, like the GM LT engine. That thing seems really promising in the next 5 years when it's more developed.
Yeah.
They seem like 10 times stronger out of the box than an LS.
Yeah, it's a good, it looks like it could be a good piece, if the castings are going to be able to withstand the abuse. That's the real thing, you know.
Better cylinder head design.
Efficient cooling capacity, right? So there's a lot of cooling around the combustion chamber area, stuff like that. Cooling around the cylinder walls. We like to run cooling in all of our engines. I don't block any of the decks off or do any of that. I utilize the cooling system in a lot of instances. So hopefully that engine will be a good engine. I know the LS's had some problems, with oil hemorrhaging, stuff that people don't even realize, knows, that the LS engine's, down.
Yeah, I don't know about the oil hemorrhaging stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the lifter area, it hemorrhages a massive amount of oil through the lifter area on the LS stuff. So, like, if you're talking about a small block nitrous steel and you're trying to get every, bit of power out of it through windage or a naturally aspirated deal or something,
Yeah.
you'd be conscious of the windage, in the crankcase area. And an engine that hemorrhages a lot, has a lot of windage. So, the LS stuff has a massive amount of hemorrhage through the lifter galley. If you look at the size of the orifice hole on the lifter galley.
So it's just pooling up in there?
Yeah, just when the lifter goes through its motion, it just drops a lot of oil out, So, guys that are really doing them right put lifter bushings in them and, restrict some of the oil to that area, stuff like that.
Yeah, and then even on, like, your Coyote program, your wet deck cylinder head still, right? You don't weld that up at all?
No, yeah.
That's pretty unreal.
We run water. I don't cut any of the material out of the deck and put inserts in like everyone does and weld on them. We just use the factory deck on them. We surface them and sleeve them.
Do you think that's the most impressive stock casting block? Do you think anybody's got a more impressive stock casting block of any kind? Like, that's got to be peak.
Yeah, it's probably...
Maybe that Buick Roadmaster block.
Yeah, maybe.
That Tick is running. That Grubworm has.
Yeah, that thing's ripping pretty good. I think that thing's just a solid chunk of iron is all that thing is at this point.
With a ton of cylinder head clamping.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, I think Brett's is probably, or like, the
Predator block.
Yeah, the Predator block is a really good block. Obviously, we have to sleeve them. I don't think the factory cylinder walls and liners and stuff that they use is the correct thing. That's why we sleeve the Shelby Code red cars, because we could make them perfect, So
And you made that bracing that goes in the valley.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff for them. I mean, there's stuff that we don't even sell or advertise, that we don't always get out there, but yeah, we make all kinds of stuff for them. They're a neat engine. I mean, they're very efficient.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I talk so much about that because it's obviously so topical right now too. Yeah. Because that the Coyote hot. Stuff is super hot right now, and the price of them is probably going to go up in the next year.
It already has. I mean, the parts, we haven't really done many price increases on any of our stuff, and we've just kind of ate it all. But an example, the crankshafts, I mean, they were $200 and something, now they're $500, Yeah. The blocks alone have gone up, obviously as demand for the cores become more. We buy a lot of them. A lot of other shops buy a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're just increasing the price. That's how they slow it down a little bit,
Yeah, and the casting stuff is tough because you also have to hope that Ford keeps using the same casting.
Yeah, they'll use the same
foundries.
And stuff. Yeah, all that'll be the same. What you'll see is some of over time the castings will start to get a little bit more flash or a little bit of core shift in them and stuff. But the stuff's so good these days. Like you don't see that. Back in the day, you'd have to look for a block of core shift. But
I've heard that's happened with Toyota blocks a little bit. Is some of the cores aren't as good.
Like the 2J stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a turbo block that's been ran, obviously it saw a lot of heat, the deck might be cracked in a lot of spots. We try to use NA cores. We take the NA cores and we machine them for a turbo block, so it has the oil on the passenger side, oil feed. Mm-hmm. So we actually drill the oil galley to the other side of the engine and stuff like that. Those are the best ones, in my opinion, to use because they're usually not beat up as bad.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, they usually come from Japan and from a whatever they were, like a taxi or something stupid in Japan.
Who knows?
200,000 miles on them.
I don't know where Victor finds them, but he comes in with 20 or 25 of them things at a time, and some of them, I'm like, where did you find these things? And he does. They get them.
I like seeing the diesel guys that run high level classes too. There's a couple pro mods out there, and Ryan Milliken out there with his
that
diesel Nova.
It's fast, man. Yeah,
it's like a 10 mile an hour on the whole field.
I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen when he first came out there. But
the thing squats real hard and
it runs.
It's got to be heavy in the front too.
Yeah, and there's guys with pro mods now with these diesels and stuff. I don't know anything about the diesel stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just fuel. You just keep putting fuel in, and it,
Yeah.
it keeps making more power.
Get it hot enough to keep putting more fuel in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just hope that it keeps making more and more power.
Living in a detonated state, space.
Yeah, but you put nitrous on it, so that's right up your alley.
Oh, yeah. I'd tear that thing up.
I try to. The problem is nitrous has gotten so expensive now too.
Sure.
That stuff's gone up like crazy, making turbos look better and better for everyone.
Yeah. One time we went through a nitrous shortage. There was one of the nitrous plants blew up or something, and none of the nitrous guys could get any nitrous,
Yeah.
So there was a point where we weren't even going to be able to race, at some point, but
Just waiting on nitrous.
we were NA at that point.
Yeah, Precision was like, all right, come buy a turbo. We got
Sold
you
a lot of
guys.
turbos, yeah.
What do you need?
How funny. No doubt.
It's interesting, too, because we didn't really talk about it much. I don't know how much you talk about it, but you were partners with Donald. You did say that in the beginning. I don't know if you talk about that very much.
Yeah, it's all right. We don't have really any bad blood or nothing like that. We're all past all that. But, yeah, we did a lot of racing together.
That was your foray into the radial racing, obviously, as one does. You go try to win his big money races. And
yeah, which was fun. I mean, we did pretty good at his stuff. We got a bunch of wins there.
It's crazy that RVW is pretty much like non-existent anymore. Like, that was so big.
It grew really fast. It grew so fast. One of the first races we had was like a radial versus a slick car, or boost versus non-boost, that's how separated this stuff was, and it was us versus them, and it's changed so much. I remember being number one qualifier with, I think, Tony Reinhauer's car. It was like 470 flat, I think, was number one qualifier.
Oh, wow.
And that's, I think it was a 632 Big Chief, 3 kits on it, something like that. Probably still had a power glide in it,
That's crazy because like 470 is not.
Oh, yeah.
It's not really that, like, I hate to say it, but it's just not that impressive.
Yeah,
like,
not for anything like that nowadays, So that's how much it evolved. Obviously, Troy Sr.'s stuff, we were racing his car, and it was the same way. I mean, we'd be out there winning races going 5.0s, 490s with a 615, or was more nitrous than you could imagine. So that's just how far it's came.
I want to eventually do like a documentary style video on like the history of radial tire racing.
That'd be cool, yeah.
So like, I want to talk to everybody that's done it. And
there's a lot of stories I could tell you.
Because it'd be interesting to try to put it all into like maybe even like a 5 video series or something like that of like the start of, I was talking to some people about the start of it with BFG tires, and then Troy Sr.'s name came up a bunch in my findings of things.
Yeah.
He was one of the early adopters. There's a bunch of notes I've already done trying to like even trace it back is tough, which is all the more reason why it almost needs to happen, because I can't even find like
there's
the
so
real
much
history of it.
There's so much stuff that, I say you kids, but like, like there's this radial board back in the day, maybe dragradial.net. I don't remember what it was, but it was like just, very simple, and that's where all the shit talking was. That's where the races were at, that's where all the beefs were.
We're talking like 2008, 9?
Oh, yeah, early. Yeah.
I mean, I was in
07, 08, early on. And
just for example, I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about drag racing then. I mean, I was up in New York in 7th grade, and there was nothing going on up there.
Oh, yeah. So
trying to unravel this from like a perspective that wasn't at all involved is difficult and fun at the same time.
I mean, to give you an example that, we were talking about having that memorial deal for Shannon Wren that time at Sunshine. He was the first to go 200s on radials. And then Donald's Amanda, Donald's ex-wife there, Amanda Long, at the time there, she went 200 on radials. She was the first one, to do that. We were building the engines for her. Yeah. And when was that? I don't know when that was, maybe 10 or something, 2010 or 11 maybe, somewhere right around there. But to give you an example, they're running well over 200 now to the eighth. We were just going 200 to the quarter, at that time.
Yeah.
So how big of a difference was that?
That's a world of difference. Yeah, a lot of names came up in it. I mean, I was messaging with Dwayne Goodridge.
Yeah.
He was like
leading edge of the radial racing stuff. He was the first to sixes.
In the
Dave,
the quarter.
No, I think Dave Hance was the first to sixes in the quarter. But Dwayne was one of the first on BFGs, like one of the first ones to make laps on those things too. Yeah.
And a lot of people will pull up like Stevie Fast or something, but way before that.
Oh yeah.
This is like,
I mean, Stevie Fast. I mean, obviously he's awesome. He does really good, but he was a weapon early on.
Yeah.
I mean, he raced. It was all no time stuff, and he crashed everything he ran. I mean, bro, he was wild.
Most no time guys though.
Most no time guys. Yeah. He was wild, but it was awesome. Because when he went in the lanes, man, I mean, you had to watch out. He was there to win it, no matter what. He'd be on the roof or upside down or on fire, and then he'd get out with that little visor and he'd start cussing at you and everything else, but he'd get it done.
Yeah, there's quite a few names that come up. Obviously, John Sears.
Yeah, of course.
Huge part of all of that.
Has been there the whole time.
And then the tire companies, there's all those storylines of
a lot of guys that were involved in the tire stuff, that would be pretty neat to get in here.
Yeah, I'd like to eventually try to document a full radial tire racing history.
You got Carl that used to be with Mickey Thompson, and then you got Tommy from those guys, and they were really the ones to push. There's another guy, John, that worked there, really to push the Mickey Thompson brand, and they were the ones. If it wasn't for them, I don't think the radial stuff would be where it is today. I don't think any other company would have put the effort, the time, the money, the financial, commitment. If it wasn't for them, radial racing wouldn't be a thing, I don't think. Obviously, Donald pushed it, but,
Yeah, without racers can only do so much if there's not a manufacturer that's going to try to match them.
That's it.
You got to kind of have an in with and it's a major company to be like, we're actually caring about this little radial tire deal at the time.
Yeah.
But maybe they just wanted to take all BFG's lunch money, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
That may have been their ulterior motive, but it turned into what everybody does now. I mean,
it absolutely was. I think also Mickey Thompson, their tire market is a little specialized compared to maybe some of the other groups. So they saw that as a good niche to follow, and I think it worked out really good for them.
Yeah, there's a couple names on my list here too. I mean, Ziff Hudson, people were mentioning, Lenko Jim.
Oh yeah, he's great. He was in early on with it. He did a lot of the media stuff for it. I'm trying to think. Go Fast Films maybe was his deal. And if you go back and watch some of those videos, I mean, you could tell these cars were going 530s, 540s, and they were out of control going 540s, Robert Cody from Category 5 race cars was one of the guys that was building a lot of the cars back then for the local guys. And he had a Nova that was just wild. I mean, he'd money hop the 330 cone every other night, it was the craziest thing,
I love that, man. That's one of the things I want to eventually nail down.
It'd be great, man.
So if anybody out there, if you're on the early history of radial stuff and you want to come make the trip down to Bradenton, probably not bad of a trip anyway.
No, it's fine. It's not far.
There's plenty of radial racing in Bradenton anyways. If you want to come and tell your story, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I'll give you a list. You can start going down a list.
Yeah, that's the goal. That is it's on the list of things to do.
It's awesome.
But man, anything else on the Fast Forward Race Engines front of things? I mean, you got an awesome team. You guys are just churning out motors. I know everybody on your team, and everybody there is freaking.
They're great.
They're top notch.
Really, the guys that I have, every one of my guys is so important to the product, to the business. They all play such a huge role. Gina, obviously, Gina, running the whole shop.
Yeah, she's the one that was in between us.
She's Fast Forward, man. She is Fast Forward Race Engines. I just do my little part. You know what I'm saying? So all the guys from the front to the back of that deal is amazing. They're the ones that do the work, and they're the ones that really produce that product. So it's their effort that makes that difference for sure.
Yeah, I can't do it without a solid ass team because you ain't building all those motors
No.
solo.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
for sure.
shout out to the guys. AJ, I know you're probably listening and putting
yeah.
a cylinder head on a car right now,
yeah.
on an engine right now.
Oh yeah, no, he's for sure working. He listens to all your podcast. All the guys do, man. All the guys love you. So
Dude, appreciate that. Thanks for coming down, man. I
Absolutely.
mean, I always say where can people find you? Fast Forward Race Engines. It's very simple. FFRE.
Yeah.
You've probably seen them in the winner's circle already because they've been there all year, even if you don't realize. But, dude, thank you for coming on. This was a blast. Happy to have you back at any time, but we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.